Welcome to today's Caregiving Essentials webinar, Aging Parents, a real-life guide to solving problems. Thanks everyone for joining us. Today is an auspicious day. We're recording live on April 8th, and in a few hours, I'm in Hamilton, and the path of totality will be coming through on the eclipse, so it's quite exciting here in Hamilton. And for those in Niagara Falls, I think you have like three whole minutes of totality. So before I begin, as I mentioned, I am in Hamilton. I'm on McMaster's campus. So I would like to acknowledge that the land on which this webinar is taking place at McMaster is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. My name is Christine Kennedy, and I work in the Office of Alumni Engagement. And this webinar series is a partnership between McMaster's Continuing Education and is a series that is held in conjunction with their wonderful online course, Caregiving Essentials. So if you're unfamiliar with that course, we'll put a little link in the chat. And Donna, Laura, and I were chatting earlier, and Donna mentioned a number of the questions that you pre-submitted. So thank you to everyone. We had hundreds of questions pre-submitted. Many of those questions will be addressed in the Caregiving Essentials webinar. So it's a good plug for that wonderful online course. But Donna will talk a little bit more about that. So I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. I know we have lots of regulars who are attending, but lots of new people. So welcome everyone who is joining us for the first time. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put that in the chat or ask a question in the Q&A section. Our chat in the Caregiving Essentials webinars are open. Usually in the McMaster alumni webinars, we close the chat, but part of the wonderful atmosphere that we like to create in this Caregiving Essentials webinar series is for people to share their experiences. So feel free to write in the chat. However, do be mindful, because it is public, that other people will be able to see it. So you might want to not put too much personal information like your name or address or anything like that. If you would like to activate the closed captioning feature, there is something at the bottom of your screens where I think you see the little more, and click on that, and then you can activate live transcript. And as always, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll get a link afterwards. So if you need to pop out for whatever reason, fear not, you'll be able to hear all of Laura and Donna's conversation in the recording. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our host, Donna Thompson. Donna is a caregiver, author, and educator. She's the author of 2 best-selling books on caregiving, included The Unexpected Journey of Caring. Donna also facilitates what I mentioned before is the free online course for caregiving called Caregiving Essentials. And she is the co-designer and co-instructor of the Family Engagement and Research course, both here at McMaster. And Laura Tamblyn Watts, who is our guest speaker. Laura is the CEO of CanAge and the author of a new book coming out that I'm so excited. Let's talk about Aging Parents, a real-life guide to solving problems with 27 essential conversations. With a legal background as a member of the BC Bar since 1999, Laura has served as a national director of the Canadian Centre for Elder Law and as a chief public policy officer at CARP. And she's an assistant professor of social work at U of T, just down the road from us. Her instrumental role in the Canadian Standards Association's development of national standards for long-term care and ongoing work for home and community care standards showcases her commitment to systematic improvement. Donna and Laura, thanks for joining us on this very auspicious day. I'm so excited to hear the conversation. I'll hand it over to you both.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. And Laura, I am so excited that you're here today, because I can't think of another person today whom I would rather be speaking with. I can't wait to dive in to ask to reflect on some of those 27 essential questions that we all want to know. I really feel like I've come to the top of the mountain and you are the guru sitting at the top. And I'm
no pressure.
Ask you
it's like it's a good thing I wrote it down. Yeah, okay.
That's right. So, first of all, I just am curious, really curious to know a little bit about you and how you became interested in aging, because you are the CEO of CanAge, and you've professionally done so much work on making life easier for older adults in Canada. Did you did you come to this work because of a personal experience, or why?
It's so interesting. Marie Beaulieu, who many of you will know, is a real leading voice in the country and of course in Quebec as well, many, many years ago, did a video research project with a bunch of folks who were in the field of aging and asked that question, like, how did you get in the field? Because we do need more people in the field. So she really wanted to know when she did this great research question. And overwhelmingly, the answer was, I had a close connection with a grandparent. And I thought that was really interesting because I guess that the answer is probably the same thing. My mom at my age, I'm outing myself, 52, had to retire from teaching. And she had 4 older adults. Actually, that's not true. There was really 6 older adults that she was taking care of for almost full time. Her parents, her aunt and her uncle, who she felt a close relationship with. And then actually, for that matter, her father-in-law and mother-in-law, who were at that point a little bit more able, but then didn't. And I think part of it was just what we did, right? So we were kind of in it. And I wasn't afraid of older people, if that makes any sense. And I think
Yes.
we spend so much time dividing ourselves up on age
Mhm.
that I had that intergenerational experience. And then I came from the sort of social justice world. I want to save the world. And I think so many of us do, particularly when we're young and the world is a big place that needs saving. And I think, like a lot of people, I was involved in the women's movement, and that led to sort of violence against children. And that led to thinking a lot about what other kinds of violence and mistreatment are out there that we don't talk a lot about. And I remember perfectly well, it was October 15th, 2004, which seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't. And I've been working in these different fields and I've done some stuff on intergenerationalism and so on and so forth. But I went to the very first provincial conference on elder abuse that had ever been held. And it's amazing that it was then. Well, maybe it was 2003. Anyway, all gets a little together. And I felt like I was struck by lightning. And I thought, aha, this is what I'm meant to do.
Oh, wow. And thank goodness you did, because of our aging population and the needs in the sector. But, I want to get right into your book, because this is a book that we need in Canada, everybody needs, and the world needs right now. We were talking just before the webinar started, and you were saying, and maybe you can share with everybody listening, why this book and why the tone that you chose for it. What is it that we need that you saw and addressed? Oh, we can.
Like so many people, getting the light when we getting ready for that eclipse, I guess. Like so many people, I raised kids, and I remember reading parenting books and pregnancy books, and there were a million things out there. And some were very preachy and some were really funny, but I felt like there was a lot of really good stuff. And then I had a toddler and I got the same stuff. And then I had a spirited child, and then I read those good things too. And every time I was looking, people would say, like, where's that book for aging parents? Where's that book? It's like, yeah, it doesn't really exist. But maybe you and I could just sit down, and maybe we could just sit down and have a cup of coffee, and maybe in, I don't know, like an hour or 2 hours, we can hit like a couple of the things that maybe are at the very top of your screen. And I thought, like, this is actually nonsense. People need the right information, and they need it not in a preachy tone. They need it not with this TV sitcom family of like a man and a woman and 2 lovely children and, the sassy grandma. Like, that's not what families are. And some of the issues are medical. Some of the issues are legal. Most of the issues are people and relationships. And people have mental health issues, and people have alcohol addictions, and people have the unsuccessful nephew in the basement that moves in, and someone has the preachy older daughter. I mean, these are all normal things. So where is the book that tells us what to do and how to navigate and still get invited for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, how not to, harm families, break up families, because like you say, I don't know how our society has wandered so far away from intergenerationalism and aging being normal. It's medicalized. It's something that only professionals can do, which is all rubbish, of course. And, so again, I'm just so grateful that you're here to talk about practicalities and about real people's real problems. So the book is coming out on April 30th, and it's available for pre-sale now. It's already #1 in Aging Parents. Congratulations. So Laura, the first section of the book, the first whole part of the book is called The House, Home Care, and Moving Out. So there are so many questions, that I have about these themes. So just at the beginning of when children are realizing their aging parents are approaching a stage where they're going to begin to have dependency needs, the first thing you talk about is age-proofing your house. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. I mean, we get these conversations like mom needs to move. And I kind of like, tell me more. When I'm using my good social work language, I say things like, tell me more about that. And when are we doing it? Inside my head, I'm going, why? Like, why is it that you have to move, right? And so the very first chapter, pardon me, is really, do you really need to move? And is it a good idea anyway? I can't tell you the number of people that say, mom's going to move across the country to where I live. And I'm like, really? Does mom have any connection to that place? Does she have any relationships there? I mean, she may want to. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad idea, but let's talk about what mom wants, and let's talk about the $50 solution. Right now, not everyone has $50, but these are often big financial decisions, right? To move out, to sell your house, to move across the country, to move out rent. What if you went to whatever hardware store that you like and ordered a bunch of banisters and put double banisters everywhere? And by the way, stairs are both good and bad. They're good because they keep you moving. They're bad because you fall. But stairs aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world. Slipping on stairs are the worst thing in the world. So how do we address the slipping problem? How do we address, maybe mom wants to stay there, but maybe we could do like a home share solution where you have a younger person moving in and paying some rent and having close connections. And then they've got some income coming and they have new relationships. What do you know that if you put double banisters, you reduce your fall rate by 56%? What if you take those same banisters and put them all along the hallways because mom's starting to wobble and then she just has a place to put her hand all the way through? What if you got a different kind of bed or a recliner chair, right? There's lots of things that we can think about. So let's address what it is that when you're saying mom needs to move, what are we trying to get at? Is there a home renovation grant available? Is there that she's tired of living alone? Is it a group scenario? So let's try to get at that problem.
So I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit because originally I thought I wanted to go section by section of your book, but I'm just dying to ask this question now, so I will. So sometimes I think in terms of somebody saying mom needs to move, it can feel, because my mom lived to 96 with dementia roughly the last 10 years of her life, and she had addictions and it was complicated. But I felt when she was living on her own that I wanted her in a place where I didn't feel the full weight of responsibility for her safety.
Absolutely.
I felt anxious and guilty all the time because the situation was out of control. And I felt she was unsafe and it was my fault. And the solution to feeling that I was being a good, responsible daughter was for her to move into care. And tell me about that. Tell me how can we deal with those emotions when that's what's driving us?
Chapter 14 is called how do I cope with all this guilt? And it says, oh, the guilt that comes from having an aging parent, it can be never ending and there's so much to go around. You can feel guilty because you had to get your mother into long-term care. She couldn't keep living independently and she's tired and she's lonely. They're guilty because you promised she would never do that. You feel guilty because you're not taking care of your own children or your career or your gardening. You feel guilty because your brother's mad at you because you're not doing enough, despite the fact that he's playing golf all the time and actually isn't really doing anything, but never mind that. You feel guilty at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep because you don't know if she's fallen and she can't get up. You feel guilty because you say things like, if you're going to live in your own house, Mom, you got to have a monitor or you've got to have a camera or I need to check in with you. You feel guilty because she tells you to bog off, right? Like it doesn't matter what you do. And so one of the things the book does is it takes you through and helps you test, where is the guilt coming from? Is it about the action? Is it about the fact that you've perceived that something's happened? I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard people say, like, I finally talked to my mother about the fact that we needed to get her a caregiver and we needed to have her not drive anymore. And I knew how terrible it was going to be. And I finally sat her down and said, look, I'm so sorry. And the answer was, I got over it ages ago. You know what? It's great having her. We go out all the time. And you're like, are you kidding me right now? I have been up with my hair falling out because I've been so worried. So some of it is also around, testing where those guilt points are. And then understanding that not everyone has the same approach. Like I'm a lawyer, but I teach in the Faculty of Social Work for a reason. Most problems aren't legal problems. They're actually communication problems. And the reality is you can't approach every person in the same way. And so part of what I do is give some little tricks. You want to talk about advanced care planning and wills and banks. Maybe don't sit there and say, Dad, I need you to do X. Maybe you say things like, oh, have you done your will? I was just thinking, I should probably redo mine. How often should you redo those things? Like, do you have one I could see? Like there's different ways in that don't infantilize people. If you ask for help, it takes away some of that tension. So there's different ways that we have learned over the years and they can help for one thing or the next, but understand whoever your parents are, that's probably who they're going to be.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh my goodness. A lot of the questions that we received hundreds of questions with people's registrations, and a lot of them have to do with how to balance autonomy or independence with safety.
Yeah, sure.
And how, I think you've already given us some very wise clues about how to do that. You did mention driving.
Oh, yes.
And you did mention this very vexing question about when is the right time for long-term care.
Yeah.
So the first question I have before we really do a deep dive into these most vexatious questions is, how do you begin to deal with a parent who doesn't appreciate or have insight into their own risks of behavior? How do you deal with a parent in denial who is very much saying, I don't need any help and I am going to continue driving and you can go jump in the lake? What do you do?
Absolutely. So the first thing I do is pass it through the Vegas test. Okay. The Vegas test is there's nothing that's smart or safe that happens really in Vegas, right? You go to Vegas to spend money and be naughty, whatever your version of naughty is. I mean, for me, it might just mean going to a concert, but whatever. Like no one goes to Vegas to be safe and quiet. So is it that like Dad is acting in a way like he's getting a motorcycle and you just think it's ridiculous that he's got a motorcycle? Okay, but he's not more dangerous on that motorcycle, really. It's just that it's dangerous to have a motorcycle. Okay. Is there cognitive impairment? No, he's just acting not his age. Right? Or they're going away and spending money on a round the world cruise. And you think to yourself, that's ridiculous. Now, remember, if you're cognitively able, you can make Vegas decisions. You may not like them and you may not culturally appreciate them. And you may think, this isn't going to financially work out and we need to figure this out. But if you're mentally capable of making a decision, run it through the Vegas test. You may not like it. And I bet you can think about times when you were a certain age that you made decisions that they didn't like either. So after Vegas, okay, now we're in the you're lacking insight and there's actually a danger. Okay. So the first thing I then look at is, are they willing, or what is a way in for them that's compelling? So telling your father you can't drive, you're dangerous, can work for a few people. Lots it doesn't. But, is your dad going to be the kind of person who's like, oh, really? I hadn't realized that. Okay, well, what do you think? And then the book goes through a number of different ways. How can you be safer? Different cars, like he can change cars. Automatic parking is an incredible thing. Is it that he's going too fast? Is it that he's being erratic? Is it that it's actually macular degeneration? So there's ways of thinking through that. If it's like a lack of insight and you're driving and you are actually a danger on the road, it's time to get a test. So some of the ways in are things like, oh, I think you can maybe get a break on your insurance, but you have to go in for the test. And in some jurisdictions, you do have to go in for tests at different ages, and some you don't. Then there is the option of, why are they still driving? So try to figure out, is it about independence, as it often is? Is it about going to the cottage? Because that's real. Right? If you live in an urban environment and if they're groovy with Uber, you can probably get around it. If you're in a rural environment or you're going from an urban place to a rural place, then you feel really dependent. And then we're going to have to talk about, is it really the driving, or is it really that you fear you can't get to the cottage, and do they really want to drive? At the end, I've always got the nuclear options, and I don't believe in tricking people. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you should go and do those things, but look, there are ways, and sometimes they're face saving. You know what? Dad doesn't feel like he can stop driving. Mom shouldn't be driving. Maybe your son-in-law or the grandchild actually needs to borrow a car for a while. Maybe the car needs to go to the shop. Maybe you need to get summer tires. And particularly if you've got some cognitive impairment and forgetfulness issues. So I'm not saying that you have to outright lie, but I know people, and I put it in the list, and I'm not saying that it's a good idea. I'm just telling you, you can take the alternator out. You can change the keys. You can put different keys that don't fit in. You can take the car and store it for the winter. So sometimes there's ways that you have to think about keeping face and not embarrassing people. And sometimes you have to make the doctor write the note, and they hate writing the note.
The doctors hate writing the note?
Hate it. They'll do anything they can get away with it, because if you take away the license, and this is statistically true, older heterosexual men over the age of like 75 are really, really the people that you are most worried about, in the sense of there's a pride and a respect, and it's a cultural norm. I'm not making this up. There's actual honest to goodness research on this. Women are far more likely to self-limit. They'll drive during the day. They'll drive in a rural community. They won't drive in bad weather. And one of the ways that I can approach that, particularly with men who, like, I'll call it like my dad, although my dad's actually a great driver and he's 87, but I would say things like, I got my eyes checked and I don't feel like driving at night. Those bright lights now are really, do you, because I'm just not going to drive at night, because those LED, they've changed. The lights have changed.
Yes.
You haven't changed, which is maybe true. The lights kill me now. And so I'll say things like, I'm just not driving after dusk anymore. And then someone will say, you know what? Me neither. I won't do. So now you've let them make the decision. So the book goes through many different strategies that depend on what kind of person is. Assess those risks, assess what's really going on. And then here's some practical ways in that don't embarrass people.
Yeah. It's so interesting that, we're talking about the dignity of aging as you age into dependency on other people, because if you don't have a license anymore, you're going to have to get somebody to try to drive you to where you need to go. So many people are just not used to that. It's hard to ask for help. And, you know, one of the questions that we had come in, and many people ask this question, you're describing ways of solving practical problems while face saving. And how do you do this? How do you manage any of it if you don't live in the same city as your parent?
And this is increasingly true. So statistically in Canada, if you're a caregiver of an older adult, specifically I'm talking about, and I really want to be clear that at the beginning of the book, I define parents and family in a really broad family of choice, encompassing supporters, great aunts. This is a very, very encompassing set of ideas. Okay. So I use that as short form because it's hard to constantly be writing a billion different options down. It's 400 kilometers if you're in the same province on average, 400 kilometers apart. Now, averages for the math people listening, because that means like one person is 5,000 kilometers away and one person is 2 kilometers away, but it's big and increasingly big. And if you are out of jurisdiction, it's on average 2,100 kilometers away. So the good news is this: technology is your friend. It really is. Finances, if you're the person who's far away, it may be that you support with finances, because there's not a lot that you can't do now on Zoom or on the internet or mobile banking and so on. So you maybe, if you're supporting people, you may have to decide what you can do. If you have to look at personal health care choices, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's less about the money and it's more about the day-to-day. And that's often where, and I give a whole bunch of different strategies. You have to assess what you've got going for you. So, you know, if it's the unsuccessful son in the basement who's kind of a failure to launch and a bit of a guy who, you know, maybe isn't so reliable, but he's also the one that doesn't have much of a job and he's at home, maybe we need to think about, is he going to be capable of providing that support? Can you pay so he's not sponging off of mom? Is there someone else or a different set of eyes that we can have in there? And then there's the practicality, like who's doing what shift? And if no one's doing any shift, that's okay. Then you have to look at the money situation and figure out, you know, what are those unpaid hours? And the other thing I assess is, like, what if you've got a really toxic relationship with your family? Like, what if this is a recipe for disaster? What if you think to yourself, I am not going to be able to keep my cool with my dad. My dad was a jerk to me. He was abusive. Like, I'm not sure I should be in a position. And some of that self-assessment's really important. What if mom after 2 I can deal with mom in the morning, but after cocktail hour, this is not true, by the way, my mom's almost a teetotaler, but so many people will say, okay, I could do the morning shift, but I actually can't talk to her after 2. But after 2 is when she gets wobbly and dangerous. So how are we going to be using community-based resources? How are we going to be able to use technology? And then what's the real assessment here?
Yeah, you know, what you're talking about is kind of trying to apply a business plan of sorts to a very emotional situation where multiple people's emotions are going to be very high. And, you know, it makes perfect sense. And what we're talking about is boundaries. And I was having a conversation with a journalist the other day, Lee Woodruff, from the States. She is a journalist for the American Association of Retired Persons, ARP. And we were talking about boundaries and setting boundaries. And I said, you know, sometimes in the case of, I don't want to look after mom, I don't even want to hear from her or deal with her after 2 p.m. The idea being that that's a boundary that you set. But sometimes we encounter boundaries with our parents that we don't know we've crossed a boundary until after we're already on the other side of it. And we're saying like, whoa, I never saw that coming. I didn't expect to have to deal with incontinence and I can't do it. But I have to do it because all of a sudden there are no options. I hadn't planned for this. And you find yourself on the other side of a boundary that you didn't even know existed.
Nope.
You just hadn't planned for that. So this leads me to the next huge question that everybody wants to hear from you on, Laura.
I'm excited. What is it?
When is the right time for long-term care?
Yeah.
How do you make that decision as a family? How do you approach that decision tree? What are the indicators? How can you know that it's the right way, the right thing to do?
In general, in this country, and it's different in different countries, but since we're talking about Canada here, you're not making that choice. Actually, you're begging for it.
Yeah.
Right now in Ontario alone, the reported figure is 44,000 people on the waiting list, 44,000. It's more like 60.
Gosh.
So by the time you get long-term care, you're on your hands and knees begging for long-term care. It's not housing, it's health. And it's health when you don't have any other options. The reality of the circumstance is you are not getting into long-term care unless you've got significant dementia, not mild, maybe not even moderate, but significant dementia. You can't toilet yourself. You're unsteady and have fallen, not a risk of falling, have fallen, and you at least have one other chronic condition. And that's the reality of triaging. If you are in a retirement home where, okay, so just to give you a sense, in Ontario, we're a little bit weird. It's only private pay retirement homes. In every other jurisdiction in the country, there's some type of subsidy. So I'll use BC as an example where, we call things different things in different places, but let's call it assisted living. In BC, you would pay 30% of your income, not assets, if you can't afford a retirement home. And you get to keep 30% of your income. And that is a model that allows anyone theoretically to go into a retirement home. If you can pay for it, you pay for it. If you can't pay for it, there's there. It's really important to remember when I'm talking about these things, I break it out in the book too. Think about living in your own home, tenancy or home ownership, something like that. And then you get in extra help. And I always start saying, and I do a whole bunch of checklists on this, start figuring out what are the tasks they hate and start getting help from that. Or for instance, they love to garden, okay, but actually they can't lift the mulch. Okay, you know what? Lots of people get someone to help lift the mulch. Well, maybe you could, I don't actually like doing the trimming, okay, but really she needs not to be doing the weeding too, right? You can start to get some stuff going or start with the things they hate. So I think about home care as not just the physical touching of your body home care, but also what's happening into the care of the home and you. Then the far other side is healthcare, where it's 24/7 and you really can't live independently in any other way. And you don't check yourself in or make a decision, it becomes so clear, and then you're on a list, and then you probably don't get in for years unless something really urgent happens. And then it's the hard part is all the stuff in the middle. So people will stay in their own homes as long as they can, absolutely, but only 5% of Canadian seniors will ever live in a congregate facility like a retirement home with health services or a long-term care home. So 95% of the population won't ever live in a group environment. And the ones who live in a retirement home kind of break into two groups. There's a big percentage in Ontario that really are getting long-term care, but they're paying for it themselves because they can't get into publicly funded long-term care. And it's just kind of a false thing that we just look the other way on, where they're paying for dementia care. Somehow you're being locked up in your own tenancy. Like it's even illegal, but somehow we look the other way and we charge people lots and lots and lots of money for things that they would ordinarily get in long-term care. And then the other group of people who live in retirement homes are younger and they are a bit more able, but retirement homes report that 40% of the population has a diagnosis of dementia. Well, 7 to 10 years to get a diagnosis, and that's not including all of the cognitive impairment. I think if we were rough and ready, it would certainly be more than 50% has cognitive impairment. And so when we're thinking about where you're making a decision, you're probably making a decision to go into a retirement home where you can kind of check yourself in. And then you wait and try to stave off the long-term care unless you're in the other group where you're begging to get into long-term care because you're paying $10,000 a month for essentially private long-term care, which isn't a thing that we have in the country. And so the decision is really moving out of an individual home and into a retirement home. And that's a big choice. It's a much bigger choice than moving into long-term care, which is usually a necessity.
Mm. Yeah, it's so interesting considering these things, because I think there is a public misconception that if the care of a spouse or a parent becomes really 24/7 kind of nursing, that long-term care is the decision that we have to make. And you're saying it really isn't. It isn't necessarily even available. So
Now, it depends where you are. Like if you're in Winnipeg, the waiting list is 400 people, right? Right. So it depends where you are in the country, and it depends availability. A big piece that I just want to add to that is, we're starting to see retirement homes close, kind of rent eviction. We're seeing one that's happening right now, of course, very publicly in Mississauga. And I think that's a huge pressure because in some communities, there is only a retirement home. And
yeah.
there isn't a long-term care home. And right now, this new Bill 7, which is law, and they've started charging people, to say if you won't go out of hospital, and this is only Ontario, by the way, it's the only
Mhm.
jurisdiction that does this in this way. They can move you 70 kilometers if you're in the southern part of the province and 150 kilometers in you're in the north. If you're a 93-year-old frail person, once they move you, you may never see your spouse again.
Yeah.
You may never see your family again, particularly if it's winter. And so some people are saying, no, we have to stay in hospital because they won't survive another
Move.
move. They will literally die. The move will kill them. And these are
Yeah.
decisions nobody should have to make. So a lot of this book is about, how do you age in place? How do you use strategies that don't cost a lot of money, and then preserve those more severe choices for when you really have to use them? And then it is that whole social isolation piece that is something that really is one of the predictors of needing to go into something like a long-term care retirement home. So the book talks a lot about what are strategies to age at place, but age connected.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. Social inclusion, friendship, just being able to contribute in some way, shape, or form to your family, to your neighborhood, to your community. Yeah, I mean, I know this because not only because of my mom, but um, one thing we did for her is she was very good at arranging flowers. So I got in touch with the flower shop near her assisted living home. And once a week, I asked for all of the flowers that were just kind of going off, that weren't at the prime of their life. They delivered them to my mom's home, and she arranged them for her assisted living home every week. So, yeah, that was a way that she could contribute. Or, I'm such a big fan of the Eden model, and having just the ability in a care home to dry the dishes, or to make the Christmas stuffing for the turkey if able. All these things that are normally just part of life. You're still a person, right? You're not just a care recipient to be somehow kept alive and do nothing else. Anyway, I guess we all have to think about how to incorporate those opportunities into our own life and into the lives of the people we love who are aging.
And not try to change who they are. You know what? If
Yeah.
your dad is an introvert and he thinks like it's a really good time to sit in the corner and do crossword puzzles, and he actually like is not a joiner, trying to cheerlead him to join like a walking club and community-based social services is probably not going to work, right? But maybe he likes to play bridge, and maybe you could get him to play online bridge. And that's an incredible thing, because then all of a sudden he can like pick up online bridge and he still gets his introversion, but he's connected and he's doing things. You know, one of the things I talk about in the book is kind of a 3, 5, and 15 rule. And you need to have 3 people that you can reach out to that would answer your phone call if you wanted to talk or be connected in some way, kind of your inner circle. 5 is better, 3 is fine. You need to have 5 people who would pick up the phone and talk to you. And they don't have to have deep, long and prolonging chats, but like you could see once a year or whatever, you would have a Christmas card or a holiday card to them. You would enjoy having a cup of coffee if that's a thing that you do, right? And then 15 people in your broad social network. And that means like if you go to the Tim Hortons and you say hi to the cashier, or, you know, back in the old days, the teller or whatever, the mail person, that person walking on the street with a dog, like those are people, maybe they know your name and you can say hi. That's a really kind of super protective circle. And then the other thing I look at when I'm doing my own sort of future proofing assessment is you need to have 3 things you do, or your mom does, or your dad does, or your stepfather does. And that could be playing online bridge. Okay. And that could be curling. And it could be that they garden. Great. Because what you don't want is to have the only thing you do is curl and then your knee goes.
Yeah.
Or your whole life is wrapped around golf, which is fine. Like you could do lots of golf and you could chat with people and have dinner and be involved in this stuff, right? But if your shoulder goes, then that whole thing unravels. So you need to have some built-in resilience of a couple more things that you do. And they don't have to be giant. That's one of the big things that I think guilty adult children figure. These things have to be huge. No, they don't. 1 outing a month plus 3 special days, a birthday, a holiday, a whatever. That's protective. 1 outing a month. It could be to the park. And something that's a bit of continuous learning that's not trying to fit them into your framework. So for instance, they probably are going to start hating restaurants, worry about incontinence. It's too loud. It's food that's not predictable if they have chewing problems. They may have dentures and are worried about that, right? So maybe it's not a meal anymore, but it's tea or a cocktail or a small walk or a visit with the small dog you have, right? So take out some of those clear rhythms, but they may not tell you that they don't want to go to the theater because they can't last for continence for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then you think to yourself, oh, you're not going out. You used to love the theater. Okay. So let's find some different ways in and try to understand that they're maybe self-limiting. And it may be that they don't really feel like telling you that they've got like urgent incontinence and they're worried about it. But I had 3 children. Like I know all about that, right? If you can do that, you're thinking, oh, you know, you love that. Maybe we could watch that on Netflix, because then you can hit pause every 20 minutes or something and go get popcorn, and mom can then go to the bathroom.
Yes, exactly. It's adapting behavior, adapting activities, adapting the environment for grab bars. Talking about putting the double grab bars in another webinar, one of the caregivers talked about how she, was living in very, economically challenged kind of circumstances. They didn't have a lot. So what she did for her mother is she put a rope on the walls, and her mother was losing her vision, but she found her way around the house with the rope that was attached to the wall. So people are so creative in finding their hacks. And in caregiver support groups, I find that when people begin to talk about the creative ways that they have solved some of these problems, it's fantastic to see the imagination and the innovation, and to be able to share those ideas.
I think some of the stuff that we're doing around neurodiversity is really helpful, right? Because you may be like, okay, my friend's kid has autism or Asperger's, or someone has ADHD and they have what we call object permanence, which I totally do. If I don't see it, it doesn't exist. If you put it in the basement, I'll forget that I have a deep freeze. I'm not trying to be cute about it, but I actually will never go down there again, right? And so a lot of those new and diverse things that we learn and have a lot of patience for and a lot of understanding with younger people are actually really, really helpful when we're thinking about aging parents, right? Clear, like change the covers or get rid of the covers on counters. If you want to leave food out on the corner, you'd be amazed. Put things where people can see them and eat them. If you are in an urban environment, and look, this isn't for everyone, and you're worried that your parents aren't eating, lots of people don't like to eat for themselves. When my husband goes away and my kids aren't home, I eat tuna sandwiches over the sink. And if I was 85 years old, they think I was like a weird, like little old lady. No, I just don't cook for other people. I eat a tuna sandwich like 5 days a week. But if I was 85 and they were starting to think something's going on, they're like, she's living on cat food. No. But if I had people to cook for, I'll cook.
Yes.
Otherwise, I do things like I can order, Uber Eats. Now, people say, oh, it's more expensive, or I go to a marketplace that has individual prepared meals, but it's not Meals on Wheels. Right now, I understand some of these have different price points than other things. You can do those in a very cost-saving way as well by doing, getting 6 people to do meal prep. And when you're an older person, you often don't eat that much, but you need to see it. Don't put it in closed Tupperware that you can't see. Have it right in front and have things labeled and right on the counters. Object permanence is a real thing as we age.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that's something I don't think very many people realize. It's hard not to put the younger version of the person and say, why can't you be that person you used to be? Especially because if it's a parent, I need you to be my mom, I need you to be my dad. And now, I don't ever like to use the language of role reversal when we're talking about our parents. That doesn't sit well with me, but these new roles and responsibilities sort of trespass on the sacredness
Yes.
sometimes of our relationships. And in terms of living at home and doing okay with disease progression in the case of dementia or Alzheimer's, for example, and just the progression of aging and the way that makes people more dependent. Given that long-term care is not going to be an option for many people, especially with the aging population and the numbers, there just won't happen for people like me. I'm going to be 69 next week, so I'm looking at my own old age and thinking, what are we going to do? And where should we live? And how can we not be a burden to our daughter, who will also be taking a role in supporting our son, who has multiple disabilities? So what is the role of long-term care insurance? Do you think that it's a good thing? And what, if anything, can we do to prepare financially for the burden of having care at home? And I guess the last question, and sorry to bombard you, but there are
No.
just so many questions. What if there's nobody
Yeah.
in the role of
Yeah.
paid caregivers? What if we don't have enough people to do that work?
Yeah. And what if you're a solo senior, which is a huge thing that's
Oh, yeah.
really, really starting, right? And the book does not assume, by the way, that we all are circulated by family that are interested or even exist, right? So being a solo senior is one that is a thing that we're thinking about. So long-term care insurance, which is a type of insurance that you purchase now and would help to cover the costs either of long-term care, which isn't free in Canada. People seem to think it's free. They won't throw you out if you can't afford to pay it. That's true. But otherwise, if you can't afford to pay it, there's some cost. or retirement homes, which is sometimes covered and sometimes not covered. Frankly, it doesn't work very well in Canada, in my respectful view. It's too expensive, and the people who need it can't get it. So it's not the product yet, I think, that we need. I think there could be a product in future, but the one that's available right now is just frightfully expensive. You'd spend more money with the product than you would actually buying the thing that you need. So that's going to be helpful in that regard. I think that we need to double down on technology, and I'm not being cute when I say that. There's a lot of things that we do very inefficiently, and that some of that stuff is care, and some of that stuff is relieving worry, and some of that stuff is transportation. Like self-driving cars are going to be fantastic when we get them, because then they can go to the cottage in a self-driving car. We're not there yet, but it's coming. When we think about the things that you can do with your phone or an iPad or whatever, remember, we are a highly technologically literate seniors population. So we keep saying, oh, older people don't use technology. It's really not very true. About 85% of all older people in Canada use the internet every single day. And more than 80% of people have more than 5 connected devices. So it's not true. Now, it doesn't mean that they use them for the full extent of everything, but neither do I, right? Like, you kind of use what you know. So digital literacy is going to be one of those things, and older people getting more used to their own technology, and with reminders and meds reminders and Alexa and Google. And you may not want those things, but if you can't afford someone else to do it, or you don't want your daughter calling you, sometimes you learn the technology because you have to get those things to be done. I think that we're going to see a real streamlining of care in future, where we're using more exchanged resources, where like I can do this for you and you can do this for me, whether it's a Golden Girls model or neighbors taking care of themselves, developing naturally occurring retirement communities. I think we're going to get a lot more energy exchange. Japan is an incredible program where you actually buy in with hours that you donate to other people, and
Yeah,
then
they're
you can
called
withdraw.
honey points or
That's
something.
it. And then
Yeah.
you can withdraw those hours when you need them. Even if you've broken your leg and you're 35, you can withdraw those hours. I think we're going to see a lot more of those types of things happening. And I think that we'll use technology for some things, but not others. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I think that when we're looking at specific issues like dementia, we're going to be able to use passive technologies, things that we don't even think about. So for instance, how often have you gone to the bathroom can be weighed, measured, and analyzed, right? I don't need someone to come and let my mother have a urinary tract infection, which is actually giving her delirium. And I've got a diagnosis of dementia, but it's actually, she needs sulfa drugs and some cranberry juice. But we're now treating her as if she's got dementia, but really I can have her pee on a stick or pee in a cup or pee in something passively and figure these things out. I think in the end, we're going to have to ask ourselves, what is the problem that we're trying to solve for more specifically? And that's what this book tries to do. Are you really trying to solve your dad's alcoholism? It's probably not going to work, right? So what are you trying to solve for? That he's going to be a miserable old guy, right? Like, you have to, what is the thing that we're trying to get at? In the end, in Canada, I still do believe our healthcare system works. I believe our long-term care system works. If you really need it, it will be there. But we need much more of the stuff like this, because I think there's great things you can do that are less invasive.
Yeah. What happens though if you have disagreement in the family about what course of action to take and what you're really trying to address? People don't agree.
Oh, like, you mean every family? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
My kids don't understand. Like, my kids love each other and couldn't agree on the price of French fries if they're staring at the same menu. And they're not trying to be awful. It's just how it is. I think what it does mean is, if you can ask your parents, you got to ask your parents. Often what the problem is, that they're all trying to be little Mr. Clever Knickers or little Miss Clever Knickers. And you got to actually figure out what the problem you're trying to solve for. And then what's the push and pull on this? What are you most worried about? Usually the arguments are based on old family patterns. Mom liked me best. you shot the head off my Barbie. Like, I'm not trying to be funny, although you try to be a little bit funny about it. And, you know, if Sister Susan swans in as the firstborn and wants to tell everybody what to do, maybe you just put up with her for 2 days and then she leaves. Like, but you're going to have to deal with the fact that she's going to drive you crazy for those days. And so many of the things is not actually about your parent. It's about the relationships amongst it, or that sense of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think, you know, in the case of parents, I remember when my mom died, she had been, you know, I mean, 96, she was, and she was, we had a difficult history. She had addictions and all this kind of stuff, but I loved her. She loved me. And, you know, I remember I put in the obituary, she died unexpectedly, because my sister and I thought that she would outlive us. She was such a strong personality. And when she died, I thought, oh my goodness, I can never go home to my mom if my life falls apart. I was a grown adult. This is in 2018, in my late 50s or whatever, early 60s, thinking I can never go home to my mom. And she lived in assisted living with dementia. But I think the relationships that we have with our parents are so fundamental to our own sense of safety and being anchored in the world, that when they begin to have dependency needs, it feels so catastrophic personally. And I have so much compassion for people who are struggling with this. I truly do. And I know you do too.
It's everything right now. I never know where my next conversation about an aging parent is going to be. It used to be quieter. We used to be quieter about it. Now I sit down to boardroom tables and people are like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's my mother calling me, right? Like, and what I like about that to some degree is we're starting to talk about it. But I think what people are just so worried about is it doesn't feel like there's the resources. It doesn't feel like, where's the tips? Where's the hacks? Where's the real things to worry about? Where do I actually need to put money? And where am I just thinking like, oh, I'm going to check mom into long-term care? No, you're not checking mom into long-term care. It doesn't work like that, right? And so it's a little bit of a level set. What we're seeing a lot of, and I was just sharing this with somebody else the other day, is people keep saying, I bought 6 copies. And I thought, really? They're like, yeah, one's for me, one's for my dad, and then the other 4 are for my siblings. And we're just going to look at things together, because I don't want to have that argument to set the stage and do the overload. And because it's got lots of checklists and it's got lots of things in there. The only problem is if you tell your dad and you'd be like, oh, that's the secret way of doing it. But you know what? I think that's okay. So there's like lots of things about hearing aids. And my friend just said, here, read the section on hearing and then let's talk about it. So it took away that emotional overload of having to become an expert on hearing and hearing aids and whatever. And that person's father did the same thing that my father did. He read the section where hearing loss and dementia got connected, and no other thing worked. And the next day that person got hearing aids, because for them, it was the lever of dementia, not the lever of hearing other people or having them speak in a certain way. But you don't always know what the levers are going to be. So that's kind of why I put a whole bunch of different ideas and approaches, and people are buying them for the family, which made me laugh.
That's fantastic. And it's such a great approach, because it sort of levels the playing field and the power dynamics of, oh, I'm the information keeper. All that knowledge is going to flow through me because I'm the only person in the family who read the book. And, you know, it just deals with that. So, you know, we've come to the end, and I just can't stand it, because I think we need to have you back, Laura. We're only scraping the surface.
Oh, would you? I would love to do more. I mean, we could do them even like by chapters and certain ones. I would love to come back if you would let me do that.
Of course. Yes. The answer is a big, huge, resounding yes. So I just want to mention that there is a wonderful template, fillable template that you can photocopy and fill in. First of all, buy the book, then you'll have the templates, all of them. But for people who registered for the webinar today, we're going to copy that checklist that you have in chapter, I forget which chapter it is, but it's a really handy task list of cut the grass, walk the dog, who could do this. And we're going to copy that and send it in an email to all of the people who registered for the webinar today, and along with a link to this recording on the Caregiving Essentials YouTube channel. I just really hope that that template in that email is going to go to so many people. They will then say, wow, this is fantastic. I'm definitely buying 6 copies of this book. And so thank you so much, Laura. I wish you great success with this very, very important knowledge tool for all Canadians. Thank you so much. And back to you, Christine.
And available on audiobook, so you can listen to it in the car when you're walking the dog.
Fantastic. Thank you. And
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
You go
and
ahead.
I wanted to make sure you're there. Thanks, Christine. And I also just thank you all for putting your comments and questions in the chat and the Q&A. I tried to include as many of them as I could, and many of them were echoed the list that we did get as when people register, they send in questions as well. So hopefully we got to most of them, but we will be inviting Laura back too. So.
Absolutely, we have to. I'm texting my friends. So Laura and I are roughly the same age, in the same position as many people in the chat. We're sharing. So I'm texting my friends, oh my gosh, did you know there were 16,000 people waiting for long-term care in Ontario? Anyway, Laura, and Donna, always
Formally
wonderful.
only 44. Formally only 44. But
only 44,000.
And there's only formally 40% of people with diagnosis of dementia in retirement homes. Right?
Yeah. It is right. That's when you think about it, McMaster has like 33,000 students, and then there's probably another 5,000 employees. So basically everyone at McMaster would be waiting, plus more would be waiting for a long-term care bed. Mm-hmm. That's really scary.
Just in the province.
Just in Ontario. Yes.
And the funny thing is, almost nobody wants to be there. And that's a whole different other webinar.
Yeah,
it sure is. And lots of comments in the chat, right, about long-term care, for-profit, the quality. Anyway, yes, we could go on for hours and hours, but we're mindful of everyone's time, and everyone wants to get out to go see the eclipse. But in Hamilton, it's super. I'm looking out my colleague's window here in the L.R. Wilson Hall, and it is completely cloudy. So I don't know if we're going to be able to see it. But anyway, I do want to mention that next week, Donna will, not next week. I'm so excited. I want it next week. Next month in May, Donna will be joining a researcher here at McMaster. It's Dr. Allison Williams. And Donna and Allison co-authored a new series, a new online caregiving series, and it is called Creating Caregiver Friendly Workplaces. So they are going to talk about that next month, which is May the 6th. They launched the online course last Tuesday, right, Donna? Which was like National Caregiving Day. Yeah, it's National April 2nd. Mm-hmm. And it sort of segues, or is a good segue to what Laura and Donna were talking about today. You know, many of us, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, you know, you're looking after your aging parents, and then quite often you're looking after your family, your own children. And if you're an employee, you want to make sure that your employer has resources and is understanding of your needs. And so that is what this new series that you've created is about. So if any people who are on the webinar now, if you are an employer, you might want to watch this so you can figure out, oh, how can I be a great employer and be supportive of my employees? So I think Jen will put the link in for the webinar next month. So with that, I will thank you once again, Donna and Laura, for joining us. Great conversation. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy day. Hope you were able to glean some really helpful information. As I mentioned in the chat, I will pick the 10 random winners. I will contact those winners tomorrow and just ask for their addresses so that I can send the books. We'll order them from Indigo and they will get shipped off to you. And I think that's it. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day and please take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.